Hello my friends, I'm about to start chapter 16 of A Look in the Dark called Boiling Pot. It's a very short chapter, so I'm also going to get into the beginning of chapter 17. Danny and Carol are now at Carol's home. So this chapter's chapter 16 and it's called Boiling Pot. Carol Green was enjoying this attentively, listening to half-heartedly Republican Paul Hanlon and her father William Irvine leaning on a farm gate and discussing the price of cattle and last year's barley harvest. Through the day, of course, it had been the usual Catholic Protestant talkabout. They talked about everything except any of the things that each thought might cause offence to the other. Talking about everything else wouldn't solve the problems between the two communities, but it wouldn't make it worse either, or at least that seemed to be the theory. Paul and William liked each other and neither wished to argue with the other. Far better, each felt to discuss neutral subjects rather than get onto controversy. So they enjoyed the crack, remaining respectful. All had laughed when Paul told a joke about the Pope, Ian Paisley and a schoolboy on a crashing plane with a shortage of parachutes. All at the table enjoyed that, because Paul was laughing at his own side. And though William Irvine had heard the joke before, he would never have told it to a Roman Catholic over a cup of tea. Danny told Carol later that discussions between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland reminded him of one of those marriages where both partners knew that the other had been unfaithful. They each chose to behave as if they didn't know about it, so they never talked about it. Carol thought that summed up the situation fairly well, but she was very pleased to see her father and Paul learning how much they had in common and actually enjoying laughter together. Danny had spent an hour and more scanning through and assimilating the information Paul had brought with him from the house on the border near Castle Derg, where their own investigation had led them to be arrested by the Provisional IRA. He was sure Sir Richard Claymore would have liked Paul Hanlon and would appreciate his help with the investigation. Information like this would go toward shredding Major Stanhurst's animal trading. His mind went back to those tense hours across the border in the Irish Republic. It is as well, he thought, that we were looking down the gun barrels of the IRA, that they'd been in that situation, because if it had been Stanhurst up there on the border bogland, he knew that by now both him and Carol would be dead. Trouble is, he mumbled, when it comes to this kind of thing, I'm quite green, really. Then he smiled at his own pun. Looking at the records from the house called Crawley, Danny wished they had similar information gleaned from those working with Stanhurst all round the world. He guessed it was something like this with the drug squad. They gathered information from this source and from that source, but the real art was in knowing when to strike. The balance for them was that every day they waited, more people were damaging themselves with hard drugs, whereas for Carol, Ricky, Sue and him, the longer they waited, the more animals were captured or killed. He found that the end was in sight, but he knew that he was going to have to see how the other three felt as well. Outside his window he heard the voices of Carol, her father and Paul Hanlon. He looked out to see Dylan chasing a stick and the two men laughing together heartily. "You'll eat with us now, Paul," he heard his father-in-law say. "Your name's already in the pot." The Ulster farmer spoke with determination. "We won't have you driving away up to the border with new food now. Come on in." Laughing like schoolboys at a poor joke Carol first heard at school, the men entered the kitchen area and Carol followed. She was wishing Northern Ireland was like this all of the time. Paul Hanlon liked this man, and for the life of him he couldn't imagine him out wearing an orange sash and a bowler hat and marching with insistence that it was his country and he'd march where he liked. Conversely, Paul imagined that he would shock them all if he told them that he had been campaigning recently for Sinn Féin and the Strabane candidate. Mealtime was just as Carol remembered it when she was home. Her cousin Matthew had called and was persuaded to join them for dinner. The large farmhouse kitchen table was well used to additional last-minute visitors, and Linda Irvine was never put off balance by that. Danny and Carol listened and laughed as the conversation turned to farm machinery and the merits of Massey Ferguson and John Deere tractors. The Irish stew was up to Linda's usual splendid standard, and all enjoyed the truly Irish hospitality in this Ulster British household. Linda even took a bowl out to Dylan, so he too could rest contentedly on his way home to Claddy. As the conversation now turned to plough, as Carol and Danny made eye contact, and those intelligent green eyes knew what her husband was thinking. They had what they'd come for. No doubt Sue had done wonders with the records, and Ricky had been busy too. They were a good team, but like her husband, she knew that 4 people alone could not be guardians to the whole planet's wild creatures. Yet these 4 people had enough. Aristocratic Sir Richard Claymore, the until recently unknown Raider Danny Green, Cockney office girl Sue, and Carol herself, with some help from Theo the Greek cafe proprietor and Claddy man Paul Hannon, were now in a position to present facts to the authorities that could not be ignored. As Carol looked down at her second bowl of good Irish stew, she thought, "Well, husband dear, we've been stirring the pot, but now the pot is boiling and it's ready to serve." That was chapter 16. This is chapter 17, the beginning of it, the first part, which is called Cards on the Table. It was 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, and it was a glorious summer sunshine outside. The atmosphere was one of controlled excitement with a serious edge to it. Ricky had argued about his being in chairman, and he'd insisted that it was Danny's place. The 4 of them were sitting round the Greens' dining table in uncharacteristic silence. Carol was thinking about the bond between them, and was reminded of some of her childhood reading, and wondered who would fit the role of which musketeer, and decided that D'Artagnan would have to be Sir Richard. All for one and one for all rattled through her mind. Then she thought back to the Irish border and the bravery she'd been able to observe in her husband. She looked across the table at her own personal superhero, and she caught his eye, which helped him evaporate a little of the awkwardness he felt about chairing this meeting. He was not used to being formal, and most especially among friends with whom there was usually complete informality. But the occasion seemed to require something more than just a friendly chat. Sue was conscious of the ticking clock, but she was as happy as a buzzard in the thermals. Before the return of the Greens to Frome, she decoded all the records, photocopied 8 times all the results, cleaned the whole house from the top to the bottom, and when they arrived she cooked them a beautiful lasagna. Now, about 24 hours later, she was so happy to be in their company, and couldn't remember feeling this good since her father had taught her to swim when she was 9 years old. Sir Richard Claymore was looking dressed for an occasion. He had on a white shirt, black blazer, and a bright red cravat. He could turn on the lordly look when he chose to. He looked at Danny, who was now deep in thought. Ricky would have loved a drink, but he thought it best to leave it till later. "Well, friends," Danny began, "we all know why we're here. We've a decision to make. Do we continue our investigation ourselves, or do we take what we have at hand, use it as evidence, and give it to the relevant authorities? If we're to continue, well, we need a plan how we're going to continue, and if we're going to hand it all in, we have to decide who to give it to. Ricky and I talked briefly on the phone last night, and we both agree that all 4 of us have an equal share in this. All have played a vital part in the investigation so far, and for that reason we have to make the decision as 4 equal partners. As we think and talk it through, we should all listen carefully to each other, weighing matters with a balance. None should be afraid to say how they really feel, but it is hoped that we can reach a unanimous decision before the night's out. I'd just like to remind you, though, of our objectives. We want to blow as large a hole as we can in the illegal international wildlife trade, and in this way protect especially endangered species. To put it more simply, we want to nail down Stanhurst and all his cronies with him. We want to act when we can get maximum results. As Carol said last night, we've the pot boiling, so is it best to let it boil over or not? If all of us, or any of us, see value in keeping going as we are, well, we have to present the reasons why. We should reach a conclusion between us tonight. Okay? Carol and Ricky nodded, but Sue was feeling a bit out of her depth. She didn't feel an equal with these 3. Danny continued, "Well, Sue, you've been a real blessing here. The work you've accomplished while we were gallivanting around is amazing. I think we should hear how you feel first." "Me?" Sue's face turned the colour of Richie Claymore's cravat. She'd not been expecting that and had intended to just agree with the rest of them. But Carol gave her a reassuring smile, and Ricky nodded and gestured with his hand for her to speak. She took a deep breath and began. Well, as I decoded Stanhurst's files, I've come to appreciate what kind of devil he is. Nothing is safe from people like him. All over the planet he has people willing to provide him with anything he can sell at a profit. He even has a man in the Pacific who'll go and collect from uninhabited islands, and another guy in London who's been paying him to get rare orchids, plants even. I'm not too ginned up on the law, but I reckon there's enough here to get him and some of his suppliers locked up for a long time. That would make me very happy. Of course, if you three see the value in more investigating, well, I'll go along with whatever you feel. Also, I would do whatever there is to be done to help. If you're asking my opinion about what is best for the birds and animals, she looked more confidently into Danny's face. When I go through this lot, I get angry. She flicked through a large pile of some of the records she'd worked on. I want Major Stanhurst put away now. Her eyes were flaring with annoyance, and I think we should go to the police and expose him for what he is. Thank you, Sue, and thanks for all that hard work, for your much more than Call of Duty contribution to our success. That's okay, Danny. I'm really going to miss it, even if it did make me angry. Both Carol and Sue laughed at that. They both understood that feeling. You know, Sue, we're very impressed. It's not just the volume of work, but the neatness with which it was all laid out, and the filing system for it. Every part of it has got your trademark. A job well done, and an organised and tidy finish to it as well. Hear, hear, old girl, came from Ricky. Well done, it's an excellent job of work. Sue blushed again and smiled weakly. I only did what you paid me for. Rubbish! Carol laughed as she spoke. You put your whole heart into it. Anyone over 10 should be able to follow all this. Stop being so over-modest. Bask in the praise. These two blighters might not say it again. Sue looked as if she might cry, but she just said, thanks. Danny looked serious again and he pointed at Ricky. Well, what about you? What have you to report and how do you feel? He smiled at the three of them and he winked at Sue. Only she knew the full extent of his personal investigations. Oh, I have some things to report, all right. And I have to say, old boy, I've strong feelings about where we've got to and where we go now. Ricky related the full story of his trip to Southampton and Eastleigh, filling in every detail with glee. Then he added the rest. But there is more, dear friends. He looked at Sue and could see that she was enjoying this as much as he was. He covered Theo's conversation with Sue's father, the way Sue handled it when she couldn't get hold of the Greens, and of course his trip to visit Theo. What a man he is, absolute salt of the earth, and what a breakfast. You're right, Danny knew it well enough, but he was getting impatient, so what about the photos? Oh yes, old boy, guess who Theo has been snapping, hobnobbing with? Stanhurst? Theo takes a good picture. Very sharp, even with long lens. Any idea who? William the Conqueror? Carol's joke fell flat. Come on, Ricky, don't take all night. Danny wanted to keep things moving. Does the name John Clayton mean anything to you? No and yes came simultaneously from Carol and Danny. It was Danny who recalled the television programmes and something about a problem with the methods. Well, have a look at these. Ricky passed the photographs and pointed out the best close-up with Stanhurst and Clayton, head and shoulders and a bit of the Major's BMW. Clayton was laughing and Stanhurst had that cold steel smile that looked as if his face would crack if the ends of his lips rose any higher. I'm right, Ricky, aren't I? There was some controversy over these programmes. He was discredited, wasn't he? Remember I told you, Carol? She didn't remember. It was in the papers. Yes, Daniel, you are correct. Sue interrupted. When Ricky showed me the pictures, I remembered him coming into the office when I was working for Stanhurst. I didn't know who he was, but he gave me the creeps. Carol understood what Sue meant by that, as only another sensitive woman could. Ricky Claymore continued with his account of things that had happened. His visit to the BBC and his old friend Stephen Sinclair, as well as his own investigation into the National Council for Geographic Understanding. He mentioned his promise that Sinclair would get the story. He described his shock when he read the literature and the way the clever Sue had instantly noticed the anagram of the patron's name. And guess who our clever girl worked out the patron is? Clayton, Danny guessed. Worse. Tell him, Sue. He wanted her to tell as she had worked it out, and he hadn't even thought about it. Stanhurst. She picked up one of the Geographic Council's leaflets and pointed out the anagram to Danny and Carol. Haymore S.J. Erstant. Stanhurst. Clever girl indeed. Major Stanhurst. Patron. Some outfit they must be. Danny was intrigued. Some outfit indeed, old boy. Ricky explained what he'd found out, and also the old jailbird he'd found in the plush Bournemouth office. Then he added in a serious tone, "Of course we'll listen to what you two have to say, but I'm with Sue. I'm worried that every day that passes permits these despicable people to profit from suffering and plundering of beautiful creatures. At this point, unless you can change my mind, I am convinced we should hand over what we have and let action take place. We will undoubtedly cause a lot of wild traffickers a lot of damage, sink a lot of them, interrupt and sabotage routes and connections. I don't think we can do much more with the urgency that is required. If the crazy people who run this world can do it, some kind of coordinated action is required. And it is required as soon as possible. That is, unless your investigations in Ireland have led you two to other conclusions that Sue and I have to take on board." "Well done, Uncle Ricky. While we were negotiating with the IRA, you were dealing with the enemy too." "The IRA?" Ricky's curiosity was aroused by that. Danny smiled at his wife. "Okay, darling, you'd better give these friends of ours an account of our Irish holiday." Carol described the events chronologically, including the experience with the provisional IRA on the Tyrone-Donegal border. Sue and Ricky were on the edge of their seats, and Ricky exclaimed that had they known, they would have been frantic. Carol assured them that her husband had known exactly how to win the Republicans over to their side, and Danny enjoyed the glory of that for a few minutes, but didn't allow her own bravery to go unnoticed. "They might have killed you." Sue wiped a tear away from her eye as she thought about that. "Well, they didn't, but we both agreed that the risk was worth taking." Carol took Sue's hand. "And you know they really helped us out." "It frightens me even thinking about it. You two are so brave." "Oh, stupid," Danny cut in with a laugh. "So, Carol, please continue with the report from Ireland." His wife continued, starting with IRA Commander Sean giving him the address in Claddagh, contacting Paul is bringing them information from the house called Crawley, and the involvement in the illegal trade of O'Connor, as well as a trip to East Belfast and Ardglass. She managed to get in a little advertising of the sheer beauty of her country, to the amusement of the others. "You know my feelings about all this, Danny, but I will state it for Ricky and Sue. I have no doubt in my mind that further delay would serve no useful purpose, and would enable Stanhurst and co. to keep doing damage. Now I know about this so-called charity being involved, I feel even more concerned. I agree with you, Sue. We have enough to lock these people up for years. I feel sorry for the poor ordinary criminals who are going to have to get scum like Stanhurst contaminating the prison. Can you imagine being his cellmate?" "Thanks, Carol. So you three are all in agreement. You think we've come to the end of investigating?" "That's what we're all saying, old boy. What do you think?" Ricky was running his hand through his hair. He knew Danny had some concern about something he'd not stated yet. "Don't you agree with us?" "First of all, I'd like to commend everyone on their work. I'm impressed, Ricky. I have to admit that when I was looking down the barrel of an Irish gun, the thought crossed my mind that you'd be sitting watching videos and sipping scotch, while Karen and I were being executed. I was wrong. I'm sorry, mate. I misjudged you. You've been out on the high wire too, and the information about the geographic, whatever it is, Council for Global Understanding," Sue filled in. "Thanks, Sue. Well, it adds to the urgency, a kind of front organisation all too big for us to look into any further. I agree 100% with all of you. We hand it over now, but how and to who, that is what we need to sort out next, and we have to get it right." So, my friends, they've gathered together what they could. They've all had a share in checking out through the code, the records. But then Sue has done the most of that. Ricky's done some investigating down on the south coast, and Danny and Carol have done some in Northern Ireland, so they've got a picture of how Stanhurst's methods work, and they feel they've gone as far as they can. So who are they going to give this to that will treat it seriously? You'll find out in the rest of this chapter. I'll continue with the chapter soon. Thank you for listening. Hope you're all well. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.